As you know, I'm not Jill Hicks. Um, Jill is under the weather tonight, and so the rest of us it's about 4 or 5 of us have to do all the jobs that she does. Um, this is a meeting that we are excited about because it helps us reinforce really a lot of the roots of this organization, which is really focused originally on environmental issues and on saving the forests, was literally the way in which it got launched. So we're going to have our special speaker in a few minutes. We've got people out at the tables still picking out some sweatshirts and I'm sorry, t-shirts. We have a couple of announcements that we wanted to get started with, as we typically do. The public record has closed on Cold Spring, which means that the answers to questions that the county council members sent to DelDOT and to DNREC have come back. And so it was announced at yesterday's county council meeting that the record is closed. There are now 2 weeks in which the public can look at those replies and respond to those responses. So if you have been engaged in Cold Spring and it's an area of your interest, take a look at those responses. They are about traffic questions and about environmental impact. We have no idea at this point when it will be back on the agenda of county council for discussion and possible action. There have been a lot of other developments in the meantime, not developments as in proposals for new land use, but a lot of other developments in the sense of other activities going on. One is that the county has launched its comprehensive planning process. I think at this point, what that means is that they are preparing to issue a request for proposal for a consultant to assist them in the process. That typically is 1.5 to 2 years long. It involves a large number of meetings. It's very complex. We have made a commitment to monitor that process as best we can over that 2-year period of time. The 4 or 5 of us who've been monitoring a whole lot of things can't handle that. And so we're looking for volunteers. We're looking for more folks to step up and volunteer to be involved in one of the different substantive areas that the comprehensive plan consists of. So there's a whole long list of them. We'll be talking with you about what all those areas are and where you might fit in. And so please be alert and aware of those opportunities. The other developments are really about traffic. The corridor study, the coastal corridor study, has had more meetings, a public meeting in which they discussed ways in which there might be some relief on the 2 corridors, 9 and 16. They also talked about trying to wrap up sometime in the summer of next year. But at the same time, there's going to be another effort launched. The Office of State Planning Coordination met with the county council yesterday to discuss the possibility of creating 2 new planning areas. They're called corridor planning areas, one for US 9, one for US 113, US 9, the area between Georgetown and Lewis, and the one on 113 from Georgetown to Millsboro. The basic logic of that is that developing a transportation plan for Route 9, when it doesn't coordinate with the land use plans, how they are going to organize development as it spreads forward. And of course, that's almost an impossibility to organize the development as the way that we do business now, which is when the developer really determines what happens on all these plots of land. So the push is from transportation, especially DelDOT, to get the land use decision makers together with the transportation planners to have a more coherent plan for the areas along those corridors. This is all part of the Office of State Planning Coordination's effort to have a better, more productive relationship between the state and the county, and one where they communicate more effectively, coordinate for the first time ever, and when they can kind of work in tandem as opposed to kind of coming to collision points, which is what has been happening historically. So in addition to people from the Office of State Planning yesterday, the Secretary of Transportation was there, the Secretary of Agriculture was there to give an indication that this is a serious effort on the part of the state. The governor's advisor on land use was there. And so we're hopeful that the county will leap on this, because it really was one of the parts of our argument about what should happen before a decision on Cold Spring is reached, that there needs to be a kind of comprehensive plan for Route 9, not just kind of spot decisions. We'll take up this proposal and then we'll take up that proposal, et cetera, as we move down the line. So there have been lots of things percolating. Maybe it's the holiday spirit. Yesterday, at least, the members of county council seemed receptive to the proposal, but we'll see exactly how that happens. The Secretary of Transportation was very optimistic about being able to kind of pull together planning resources and getting this done in a fairly short time frame. She was talking about 6 months, which would surprise me. And because I think that's a more complex question, perhaps, than she realizes. Although she is from Southern Delaware, she is from Sussex County. She lives in Sussex. Let's see if I can move one more. This is going to be our speaker this evening, and we will turn to him in just a minute. There's one slide missing. We have had to change our upcoming meeting night. We've historically been on Tuesday nights. It's going to be on Wednesdays because this room gets taken up. And so we have dates laid out for January, February, and March, which is the slide that I seem to have skipped. And so it'll be on the website for you to look at. And if I look at my phone in a couple of minutes, I'll be able to announce it maybe at the end of the meeting when those dates are. Judy Rose is right here. Thought you were still out there.
No. Hello. Hello, everybody. So the time has come that actually Belle Meade will be on the county council's agenda for next Tuesday, which is the 17th. So here's a picture of the horse farm, just a little review, which you probably know all about. That this is the first C4 that's been proposed in Sussex County, and they will begin deliberating on the, I said the 17th, it must be the 16th. Please come to the council chambers. How many of you are planning to come and put butts on the benches? Okay, great. And we will have some little labels that say no zone change, Belmead and Atlantic Fields. And then I also have an announcement for Atlantic Fields. Yesterday in the county council meeting, they announced, because of some little bureaucratic error, that the Atlantic Fields record, public record, is now open for the public to respond to the state agency responses only, right? So that record will be open from yesterday until for 2 weeks, so until the 24th. If you have submitted something and it didn't appear there and you have it, I would resubmit it and they will put it up. Also, some of you copied Route 24 Alliance at Gmail with your comments, and I will take all those and forward them to P&Z. And then, of course, you know, the county council only announces its agenda 1 week prior, or sometimes just 6 days prior. And so we have no idea of when Atlantic Fields will be. This December 16th will be the last county council meeting in December. So the next meeting for the county council is January 6th. Oh, I forgot, I'm supposed to announce about t-shirts. So we are inviting everyone to take really as many t-shirts as you'd like and give them all to your friends, families, neighbors, all these nice I Speak for the Trees t-shirts, because we no longer, I think we saturated our market with them. So we're willing to give them all away. So please, particularly if you came in later, take some with you.
We still speak for the trees, and we'd like to get everyone else to do so as well.
So Belmead, it was B-E-L-L-E and M-E-A-D. Mead can mean a meadow, and that it was Belmead Horse Farm for maybe like 4 or 5 years before Capano bought it, and then condensed the name to Belmead LLC, and then put in the application. Not that I know of, because it's owned by Capano,
who is a big developer upstate primarily. I did find those dates, and so the dates for upcoming meetings in 2026, I have to start remembering that, are January the 14th, February the 11th, and March the 11th. All of those are Wednesdays, and we will be continuing to meet at our regular times at 7 to 8:30 or thereabouts. We are really happy tonight, as I said, to return to our roots and have Steve talk about the forests. And to introduce Steve is going to be Rich Barrasso. Rich?
Good evening. Thank you for turning out. I know December is a very busy month, so thank you for all being here. Our speaker tonight is probably not a stranger to some of you because Steve has spoken to the group in the past. Steve is one of those persons who chooses to retire and move to Sussex County and brings, like many people, a lot of talent and experience with him. And Steve was had attended one of the SPC meetings and said, hey, I'd like to volunteer. And we were very fortunate to take advantage of him stepping up. Steve, for SPC, has been involved in a number of committees, including the Development Design Committee, Steve has been part of the speakers from SPC that provided testimony at the Chapter 99 review, as well as open space. And in fact, Steve and a couple others are joining for a private meeting with the county tomorrow on the topic of preservation. Steve is the former director of Forest and State Forester of the state of Vermont. And I kind of am close to that because my daughter is a graduate of UVM, and having traveled up to UVM a couple of times a year, I fell in love with the state. How could you leave it other than coming here? So this evening, Steve is going to present the economic as well as the environmental and health benefits of trees and forest cover. He's going to share some economic facts and data as a way to put a number to the long-term benefits of our life-sustaining green lungs of the earth. Steve comes after 43 years with a lot of experience, a lot of leadership, not only within Vermont, but outside of Vermont. During his 43 years, Steve served as the chair of the National Association of State Foresters, Urban and Community Forestry Committee. Steve was a founding member of the Sustainable Urban Forest Coalition, a member of the National Urban and Community Forestry Advisory Council, and the chair of the American Tree Farm System Recertification Board. So a lot of experience with trees and forests, and we're very fortunate to have him as part of support and efforts with SPC. So one more point, Steve's better half, Sue Sinclair, is here as well. Sue has a long career in history with the state of Vermont in the area of regional planning. And we have tapped into Sue to help on our efforts over the next 2 years on the comprehensive plan. So we get 2 for the price of 1. Steve Sinclair.
Yes, a little bit here. There we go. Thank you, Rich, for those welcoming remarks. It's not very difficult to get a forester to talk about trees. That's our life. My friends and colleagues were always surprised that someone from the second most rural and fourth most forested state in the Union would have an interest in urban and community forestry. But I think because of working and living in Vermont and recognizing and realizing the benefits and values of forests and forest ecosystems and what is lost in our urban environments when that ecosystem has been constrained, made me realize that we need foresters that can be advocates not only for our wildlands, but also our, what I'd like to call our human habitat. For those that don't know, urban forestry seems somewhat of an oxymoron. What do urban and forests have to mean together? But urban forestry is really the art, science, and practice of management of trees and forested ecosystems in and around cities. And as urban foresters, you don't manage the forest as much as people's expectations of the forest. What do people expect? And that's what drew me to urban forestry, is that connection of trees and people together. That's all great to be able to walk in the woods and look at trees, but it's really those interactions of people in our communities that makes urban forestry something that I really got interested in. And after all, humans are forest dwellers. Our primate lineage began in the African and South American forests, and recent research has shown that Homo sapiens lived in the forest 15,000 years ago. Even today, over 1.6 billion people live within 15 miles of a forest. This human forest nexus is based on a lot of cultural values that people place on forests, the economic dependence that we have on forests and forest resources, plus all those ecological services that forests provide all of us. There's an interesting book called The Forest Journey by John Perlin. And in that, he talks about the movement of human civilization as it tied to the forest, and that our human population and civilization rose and fell as a result of their use and disuse of the forests of the world. And if you think of our country, the New World, the interest that Britain and Europe had on the Americas was because of the vast forest resources that we had. So tonight, we're going to talk about the fact that, yes, money does really grow on trees. There are environmental and social and economic benefits that we derive from our trees and forests. Joyce Kilmer, the famous author and poet, wrote, "I think I shall never see a poem lovely as a tree." So what is a tree? How do they differentiate? How are they different? Well, first of all, a tree is perennial. Now, plants can be perennial too, but trees are perennial. What distinguishes them from other plants is they're a woody plant. They have a wood system, a structure in it that provides a stability that allows trees to advance in age. They typically are single stem or a trunk, although down here the prolifery of crepe myrtle would be considered a tree, and those are multi-stem, but typically trees for the most part are single stem. They have a distinct crown of foliage. Typically the literature says it has a mature height of a minimum of 13 feet and a trunk diameter of at least 3 inches. So then what is a forest? Well, a forest is made up of trees of at least 10% stocking. But a forest is more than just trees. A forest is an ecosystem of plants and animals and other microorganisms that all work together in this amazing web, and that creates this ecosystem that is unparalleled. Forests, for the most part, are defined by specific criteria. They're either based on tree height, so it's a mature forest or a young forest, canopy cover, species composition, or age. Let's talk a little bit about the forests of Delaware. And this information I got from the Delaware State Forest, Delaware Forest Service. And you might wonder, well, how does somebody come up with these figures? You know, the people go out and count individual trees. You know, that seems like a monumental task. Well, actually, the states, in cooperation with the U.S. Forest Service, have a program that's called FIA, Forest Inventory and Analysis. There are plots throughout the entire country, permanent, established plots in the country that are visited. They used to be done decennial, once every 10 years. Now they're done on more of a reoccurring basis, and they're supplemented with some GIS information where they go out and they measure the trees of the United States, in the entire United States, and are able to come up with these individual reports. So for Delaware, this is figures from 2023. There's 353,000 acres of forest land in the state of Delaware, which is approximately 29% forest cover. And I remember I said that Vermont is the 4th most forested state in the country. What's the first most forested state in the country? Who has an answer to that? Maine, absolutely right. It goes Maine, New Hampshire, West Virginia, and then Vermont. So you would think some of these states like Oregon, Washington, Alaska, that have these humongous trees, it's not based on height, it's based on canopy cover. So in Delaware, 29% of the state is forested. Just as an aside on that, it can also be broken down by county, and it used to be that Sussex County was more heavily forested, but we're seeing, because of the loss of forest canopy in Sussex County as a result of development, now Kent County has a higher percentage of canopy closure than Sussex County. 79% of the forests of Delaware are privately owned. So they're not under public or public-private partnership. They're owned by private forest land owners. And that's very typical for the rest of the country, is that on average, about 75 to 80% of the US forests are in private ownership. Each owner with their own individual goals and opportunities on how they want to manage that resource. Let's talk about trees. Once again, they didn't go out and count them, but based on the forest inventory and analysis, there's 235 million live trees in the state of Delaware greater than 1 inch in diameter. Red maple, loblolly pine, and yellow poplar are the most abundant species. And who does it? What the Delaware state tree? Anyone know what that is? American holly. That's correct. I mentioned about the loss of forest cover in Sussex County. Between 1998 and 2023, there's been, according to FIA information, 43,000 acres of forest loss in that 10-year period. The Delaware Forest Service is, in cooperation with Sussex County, is doing a canopy, a GIS canopy cover designation for the entire county, and they're going to try to differentiate whether it was from ag conversion, because sometimes fields get or forests get removed for agricultural conversion, or from losses from other means. But tonight we're going to talk about the benefits and values of tree and try to put some new numbers behind them. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this chart, and we're going to go around the circle and talk about these many benefits. And we're going to start off with how trees help clean our air. Trees absorb odors and pollutants and filter particles out of the air by trapping them on the leaves and bark. And here's just an example on that. And if you look on the right-hand side, you'll see that that the NOxes, those oxides associated with nitrogen, in particular carbon dioxide, are trapped in the stomata, which is an opening in the leaf surface. So those are actually absorbed into the leaf surface and used during the process of photosynthesis, and those are captured. Additionally, pollutants, either voxes or other particles, are trapped on the bark and particularly on the leaves, either on the waxy surface or on the underside of the leaves. Some leaves are very hairy. The scientific term for that is pubescent. And maples, hawthorns, and birches are good examples of that. If you turn the leaf surface over, you'll see that it really has a lot of hair, and those will capture pollutants and particles and retain those. So studies have indicated that roadside trees can enhance indoor air quality and reducing the number of pollution levels by more than 50%. and that a single tree can remove 30 pounds of air pollution a year. And as we get further on in the talk, we'll put some dollar figures on that as well. Okay, next up, trees help reduce stormwater runoff and flooding. Trees reduce runoff by breaking rainfall. You've got the branches, the leaves, the trunk, the roots, that all slowly slows the process of the rain reaching the floor, the soil, and tree roots act like sponges, absorbing water from the ground and helping groundwater recharge. Tree roots hold the soil in place and reduce erosion. One of the things that the Sussex Preservation Coalition has been working on is trying to look at existing county code and the predominance of developers of using wet ponds for their stormwater management. So that all the sites are graded off so the water goes into a storm drain and then eventually into a wet pond. We're suggesting that there are other alternatives out there of using existing forest cover as a means of stormwater control. This is a picture of a 1-year-old Douglas fir seedling that was grown in a glass container. Look at the root systems from a 1-year-old seedling. So you can see what a large tree and the root system that's developed from that, how good a job that can do to conserve and retain water and reduce erosion. I have always thought, and I think this diagram represents it, that the tree's roots are really their lungs. And in fact, to some extent they are, because tree roots need oxygen in order to flourish. And that's why when trees are planted too deep, they don't do well, because the root systems are so low, they're not able to get that oxygen that they need to sustain the plant. So one large tree can capture 1,000 gallons of rain annually, 1,000 gallons. And combining trees with other natural landscaping can reduce storm runoff by as much as 65%. And it was interesting in the recent, I read in the recent article in the Sussex Gazette, Cape Gazette, yeah, Cape Gazette, that when the state was providing input back to the council on Cool Springs and Denrac, one of their concerns was a loss of forest, and they specifically addressed this concern of forest loss and the impact that it could have on soil erosion. Well, one other thing before I get to that, this issue of trees for stormwater have been recognized for years. The Chesapeake Bay Planning District, the Environmental Protection Agency has a regulation that in effect for the Chesapeake Bay that is imploring all the states to come up with best management practices to retain forest cover because of the degradation in the Chesapeake Bay. All right, our next benefit, trees improve human health. Trees filter airborne pollutants, as we talked earlier, that can reduce conditions and caused by asthma. Areas of high tree canopy show increases in outdoor activity, improve worker productivity, decrease tension and depression, and speed up recovery. And some of the research that I was able to find showed that workers without nature views from their desk claim 23% more sick days, and patient recovery time in hospitals is reduced by 15% with views of trees. There's a doctor's practice in Washington, D.C. that does an RX tree. They've got a program in the DC area where they're actually prescribing patients an RX to go out in nature because they know the benefits and values of fresh air and being out in a natural environment. Here's a big one: trees combating climate change. And trees play a vital role in absorbing carbon dioxide in leaves and storing carbon in trunk and roots, while releasing oxygen back into the air from leaves. And I don't think it's too simplistic to say that trees are really the climate solution. And in fact, nations and the climate action and accords have addressed that. And there's a lot of emphasis on a global scale of protecting existing forests, practicing sustainable management, and strategic reforestation around the world to fight climate change, because trees are amazing carbon sinks. Through absorbing CO2 through photosynthesis, they store that carbon in their main stem, but also in the root systems. The root system of a tree on a mass per mass basis is equal to what's above ground. People don't realize that. So that carbon is not only being stored in the main stem, but also in the roots. And even when trees are harvested, if they're then produced into durable goods like furniture, that carbon is still being captured and maintained. The whole issue of forests and carbon science is really debatable. There's a lot of talk about whether mature forests store more carbon than young forests. In fact, a mature tree will store more carbon, but younger trees collect it more quickly because they're growing more rapidly. Then there's a question about burning wood. Is that carbon neutral or not? And there's a lot of science now, and there's a lot of foresters and forestry that's really now going directly toward climate change forestry. So an acre of mature trees can absorb as much CO2 as a car produces driven 26,000 miles, one tree, or 1 acre of trees. And a single tree can absorb over 48 pounds of CO2 annually. Trees can save energy. Tree canopy can shade buildings and act as buffer and windscreens. Now, it needs to be done strategically. And here's just a diagram of some of the things that can improve through strategic tree planting. Planting a tree on that shades your air conditioner unit will keep it from having to run as much. Putting trees on deciduous trees on the south side of your property that can shade the house from summer suns, but then lose their leaves in the winter, so you get that solar radiation during the winter time. A block of evergreen trees where the prevailing wind is, the north of the west, can do a great job. So tree planting can save energy if it's done strategically. We had a program up in Vermont was called Plant a Tree. You need to plant a tree. You need to plan before you plant. Just planting trees without a plan in mind is wasteful. So properly placed trees around buildings can reduce energy consumption, cutting air conditioning needs by 30% and save 25% on heating costs. And I will have at the end of this a list of the references where this information came from. Trees cool the air. Trees shade surfaces through evapotranspiration, release water vapor into the air. I'm sure some of you have heard about the heat island effect or have felt it. All you have to do is be in a forest in the summer versus a parking lot. and you know what an urban heat island is, that those impervious gray, black surfaces are absorbing the sun's rays and radiating out heat. And that yellow line shows you that the curve represents a temperature variation in an urban area from a rural urban park into a downtown city setting. And you know, we've all noticed how much hotter it is downtown than in your neighborhood or parking lots. Evapotranspiration can reduce peak summer temperatures by 2 to 9 degrees. And evapotranspiration, a good way that a tree does, a good way, I guess, to describe it is if you go to a theme park and oftentimes they'll have a misting station, you know, where they have the mist to cool you off. That's what a tree is doing for us all summer long. Through that evapotranspiration process and photosynthesis, it is taking in CO2, it is giving out oxygen, and at the same time, it is releasing this water vapor, which is cooling our air. So let's recap what we've done so far. We've talked about how trees can clean the air, reduce stormwater and runoff, contribute to our health, reduce the effects of climate change, save energy, and provide cooling. Any questions up to this point? If you're like me, you can't remember them until the end, so we'll take a little, yes. Oh, in terms of its percent of yeah, that's a good question. No, I don't, but I'll get back to you and we'll put that on the website with the presentation.
Thank you. Hi. I'm just curious, are developers getting wise to, or at least feeling pressure to plan more around the types of trees and where they're planted in new developments? Do you know?
Well, I guess I'll let Joe or Rich comment on that. We're trying to move them in that direction, working with the county council on making some amendments to some of the planning and zoning regulations. They made some progress with perimeter buffers, where they're now trying to encourage people to retain buffers around these developments versus clear cutting them and then planting. But there's room for improvement.
I'd say the progress is slow. Yeah. Another question.
Thank you. Just real quick, how do trees help reduce crime? People are less crazy if they have trees nearby?
Well, we're going to get to that. That's one of the ones coming up. We haven't got. I'm only halfway there. All right, let's. Oh.
A couple of things, Rich. Very good. I've learned quite a bit tonight. How many forgetting about where put them in a location from the homes that you showed, what do you suggest? How many trees per acre?
For
the acre lot, say my house is on an acre. How many trees should I have?
Well, that's a good question. You know, we talked about you want to plan before you plant. So what are you trying to accomplish? Are you trying to bring wildlife onto your property?
15 minutes. Please bring any materials to the circulation desk to be checked out. Thank you.
Are you doing it from an aesthetic standpoint? Are you trying to do it for energy conservation?
Well, all 3 or 4 or 5, wherever you're up to.
Well, and I'll use this as an example. One of the things that we've been working with the county council is this issue of if there is forest loss as a result of the perimeter buffer rules, where if they remove forest and they need to then replant, it's a 2-for-1, and we're requiring at least 100 trees per acre. So that would equate to what a a low stock forest would be with 100 trees per acre. In terms of your own property, I guess it's just based on what your preference is, really.
Right. Well, coming from northern New Jersey, I've learned that there were a lot more trees now than there were in the 1800s because they were cut for lumber, heating your home and whatever. So we have improved there quite a bit with capturing carbon. What does a forest, what is the definition of a forest though? Like a hedgerow is not a forest. I mean, how many acreage of trees?
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. I should have mentioned that because I said a forest, you know, it can be categorized by its size, by its age, by its species type. In fact, the Delaware is considered the oak hickory. That's the forest component for what they consider our forests in Delaware. On the county code, in order for it to be considered a forest, it has to be, is it 10,000 square feet, which is about a third of an acre. A quarter of an acre, yeah, okay. All right, let's move on.
All the questions come from the other side of the room next time.
Yeah, okay. Okay, trees provide wildlife habitat. Trees and forests are essential for providing this habitat, supporting a wide range of species and bringing nature back into our communities, offering enjoyment, and actually serve as indicators of ecosystem health. The acclaimed author and ecologist, Dr. Douglas Ptolemy, that SPC invited back in September to the high school, talked about, spoke very clearly about decried the loss of nature and flora and fauna and the need to return to a more natural system in our built environment, in our human environment. And he called this his hometown national park, that we all can play a part, that we can't just rely on the wildlands forests, the national parks, the state forests to provide us all the ecosystem services and benefits that we individually and on our own homes can create an environment that is bee friendly, that is wildlife friendly, that is providing those necessary environmental services. And the urban forest can contribute that. Over 1,000 species. This is something that Dr. Ptolemy talked about. Rely on trees for their survival. This is probably the one that most of us you remember from elementary school. That trees provide oxygen, and trees are really one of the largest generators of oxygen. They produce oxygen and remove and use CO2 through the process of photosynthesis. And I've actually got a good diagram that shows this. So that process of photosynthesis is the tree's leaves that I like to call nature's solar panels, absorb that sunlight and CO2, and through the process of photosynthesis, create starches and carbohydrates, which are then brought down into the main stem and used to grow more roots, more trunk, more branches, and then releases oxygen back into the atmosphere. And that's what's happening during the day. In the evening, primarily is when respiration, this evapotranspiration is taking place, where CO2 is added back into the environment. Actually, a little bit of oxygen is intaked in the evening hours, and CO2. So kind of a reverse process, but at a much reduced rate from the daytime when the sun is out. A single tree can supply a day's worth of oxygen for 4 people. One tree. And in fact, the Amazon rainforest produces 20% of the world's oxygen. 20%. Next up, trees increase property values. Trees add value to property and communities, and shoppers are drawn to well-landscaped spaces. You know, but Sue complained that I didn't use local pictures, but I will have later on. But where would you rather have your house situated? You know, it's common sense that people are going to enjoy a tree-lined street versus versus one without. And we purposely chose our lot on a cul-de-sac against a forest. And Sue has to remind me, don't complain about the leaves because you wanted that lot, but you know, it's as a result of that, and the fact is that homes with trees sold for an average 5% more in value and 2 days faster. And studies have indicated that in cities that spend $1 on trees planted, they yield $5 in benefits. One of the things that I think the county codes need to address relates to tree planting, because right now there's no requirement to plant trees in the green belt, which is that strip between the curb and the sidewalk. There isn't even a requirement to plant a tree on a lot, on a development, on a house lot. The builders are doing that because they know the value and benefit. That's really short-sighted and needs to change. We need to come up with better landscape requirements in our subdivisions that are requiring trees along our streets and on people's homes because of all the benefits they provide. Yes.
So in Lewis, there's an ordinance for tree planting, new construction or redevelopment. For every 2,500 square feet, there has to be a tree. So a 10,000 square foot lot, which are what we have in Lewis, would have 4 trees. And there's also an ordinance for protecting trees during construction.
Yeah, and you're right.
So-
The municipalities do have that. I believe Rehoboth also has that, and Henlopen Acres. I've been reading in the paper. There's been a lot of controversy in Henlopen Acres because they have I think a canopy goal that homeowners need to retain a certain amount of canopy, and any development that occurs, they need to either reduce that or replant. So the municipalities are doing that, but I think we also need to see this on the county level as well. As the same token is that I'm amazed that that the parking lots in our shopping centers aren't requiring trees for the same reason. In Vermont, we always had the problem with that because of snow removal, but can't really use that much of an excuse down here. So once again, I think, you know, yeah, it's gonna increase the cost of these developments. And, you know, for a homeowner, it may increase the cost to the homeowner, but what better time to do it during the construction phase than versus afterwards? Trees improve drinking water. You know, back to our stormwater and erosion. Trees also, and trees and forest watersheds are critical for providing quality drinking water. The tree's roots, remember that 1-year-old seedling I showed you with the root systems, they do a great job of bringing that water in and removing all the contaminants and infiltrating that and allowing it and slowing down the rate of runoff that creates erosion and sedimentation. And in fact, in 1997, New York City invested $1.5 billion in forest preservation up in the Catskills. They purchased and preserved and put under easements thousands and thousands of acres of forest land, because that's where the New York City water supply comes from, is up there. They recognize that by managing and conserving that forested watershed, they could reduce the need to build a $6 billion filtration plant in the city. Trees reduce noise. Trees help reduce noise levels by blocking and absorbing sound. And tree-lined streets are much safer for traffic. There's been a lot of studies on this and about whether or not this is truly a case. And is it more blocking, that because you can't see the traffic, you don't hear it? It's like, as a tree falls in the forest, does it make a sound? But the fact is that if it's a sufficient wide enough buffer, and it needs to be at least 30 feet or 50 feet, then trees do provide noise control buffer. In fact, that was one of the rationales that we were using, SPC was using, when we were talking with the county, when they were updating their perimeter buffers, of having a bigger buffer than the 30 foot, because of the benefits from a noise control, along with many other reasons. Tree barriers can reduce noise by 5 to 10 decibels through absorption and deflection. And then let's not forget about the benefits and values of street trees and traffic calming. That's a very used practice on streets where they're trying to slow down traffic, is by putting in trees that kind of create that canopy over the road and causes people to slow down. Okay, to trees reduce crime. Trees do, and natural landscapes do, increase a sense of community well-being. There's a lot of discussion in the urban forestry field right now related to tree equity. The American Forests Association has been doing a study of GIS study of urban areas and looking at tree canopy and its relationship to crime. And the fact is, from an environmental justice standpoint, it's our lower income, poorer communities and cores of our city that are often the least green, that have the least number of parks, that have the least number of street trees, and that are getting, and that's just one of many social and environmental and economic services that are being lacked, and that we really do need to be more inclusive, involved in looking at our urban core areas and being more relevant to doing planting. In fact, the U.S. Forest Service has a program, grant program, that states can participate in, and Delaware is in fact participating in, where the tree planting grants can only go into areas that, through the census, have been meet some specific criteria. So it's a lot of it is in the Wilmington, Dover area, but I believe there is one or two small areas in Sussex County that do can comply with that. The studies have shown that public housing, residents, and trees and natural landscape report 25% fewer acts of vandalism, domestic aggression, and violence.
Thank you.
So that we went around our chart, but when I looked at the chart, I realized that from my standpoint, it was still missing a couple things. It didn't talk about how trees promote healthy soil. And you think about it, that all of that leaves and debris from a tree that's falling to the floor, that's decomposing and adding to the organic matter and layer of the trees, benefiting from that. You also have the tree roots that are breaking out upsoil and providing aeration and movement of nutrients and water through the soil. So trees most definitely improve soil health. All too often, urban forestry was really just considered a beautification program. That's what, the garden clubs were involved with it because, we'll plant a tree because it makes our community more beautiful. And I don't think we should completely discount that. Our lives are harsh and hard enough. We deserve a little beauty where we live, where we work, where we play. And the beauty of trees and planting trees in our communities, I think is something that we should be involved with. And then additionally, it gets people outside and connected to the natural world. There's all sorts of talk about the youth of today and how, they're more attuned to their tablets and not getting that connection with nature. I'm sure most of us in this room spent more time outdoors than we did indoors. In fact, I think the reason I became a forester is because our house backed up against the woods, and that's where I spent my time, is in the woods. So trees, I think, really do allow, the Japanese talk about what do they call it? Forest bathing, right. The benefits and values of getting outside and being with trees. Okay, so the figures that I was giving you were kind of percentages, numbers, and so on. But I started off saying that forest and trees, money really does grow on trees. And I didn't give you any specific dollar figures, did I? Well, in fact, I can. iTree is a tool for assessing and managing forests and community trees. It was a collaborative venture between the U.S. Forest Service, Research Forests. When people think about the U.S. Forest Service, they think about firefighters and fire towers and the National Forest. But the U.S. Forest Service is a big organization, and they provide grants and work cooperatively with programs with state agencies. I was very involved with the U.S. Forest Service. They did the FIA, the Forest Inventory and Analysis, and they have an extremely robust research arm, U.S. Forest Service Research. They do a lot with wood technology, with the new science of using wood in mass timbers and replacing plastic with wood fiber derivatives. They do a lot of studies and research on how to manage forests for ecosystem and carbon values. And they also do a lot of research in urban forestry. And this is a tool that they did along with a couple of other partners. It's called iTree. And it has several components to it. One of them that we're going to look at tonight is MyTree, where you can actually come up with the dollar values that your individual tree is providing you for benefits, you in society. They also have a element that's called iTree Canopy, and I was hoping that Ewell was going to be able to help me with this because she has more GIS experience than I do, but she didn't have the time. But what this could do, and I'm hoping that SPC will have some people that are able to do that, is to go out to Cool Springs, to go out to Belle Meade and look at that forest that's on that site and be able to actually calculate all those benefits and values, put a dollar figure on stormwater retention, on carbon storage, on energy savings, on wildlife values. It can do it. I'm going to be showing you an example on individual trees, but there is a program through iTree Canopy that can look at large tracts of forest land and come up with values that I think would be really beneficial to us, to SPC in the future, in future testimony. But we're going to look at MyTree. And my first example, and you can see the little tree there. Anybody recognize where that is? Yep, it's at the elementary school on Savannah Road. You know that big red oak that sits right out there on Savannah Road? So that's the first tree I identified. So you go on to MyTree, and you can do this, and I have the link at the end. And you can pick out any individual tree that you want. I use 2 examples. So I picked this one, and then it brings you down to the next menu. So you can see it's at 820 Savannah Road in Lewis. It wants to know what the tree species is. That's a northern red oak. It wanted to know the tree condition, and I know for a fact that it's in excellent condition because Cypress Tree Service has been providing free service to that tree as a public service. It wanted to know the trunk diameter, and I didn't actually go and measure it, but I figure I'm pretty good at it. I eyeballed it at 46 inches in diameter. And then it asks also for sun exposure and proximity to a building. From that information, based on this program, it then calculates the MyTree benefits for that one tree over 20 years. And you can see that over 20 years, that tree, one tree, is providing almost $1,900 in benefits. Now, this is only looking at carbon dioxide uptake, stormwater mitigation, air pollution removal, and energy usage. So it's not, we went around the wheel with all the different benefits and values. So this tool right now just captures that. But $1,900 worth of benefits over that 20-year period. Let's do another tree. Been in the news lately. Yep, the southern pecan, and I'm from Vermont. I call it pecan. In Milton. So once again, you go to MyTree, and it's like a GIS. You start off with a world, you narrow it down till you get to where you want to be, and you highlight that one individual tree. And it was a pecan, excellent condition, 24 inches in diameter. Now this tree was not close to a building. So that's one of the, it's not on, you don't see it on the slide, but as a result, the benefits, the tree are closer to a building, the more benefits it's providing, because this tree is kind of just in like a vacant lot to some extent. But that tree has $500 of over a 20-year period for carbon, stormwater, air pollution removal. So once again, this is great. You could do this when you get home. You can do this, all the trees. You can do multiple trees on your property. It's really easy to do. MyTree, it's in iTree, and then you go to MyTree, and you can calculate that. We'll wait till the end. All right, let's see here. I'm going to close with a few more local pictures and some local issues. We had a saying in Vermont: small forests are a big deal. All too often, we think about forests, and in general, we think about these large, huge tracts of forest land. And in fact, they are providing more benefits and values than these little islands of forests. But all forests have value and benefits. We need to start doing a better job of protecting them. Once again, DNREC, when they were providing their comments on Cool Springs, talked about wildlife mitigation and habitat fragmentation as a result of forest loss that could potentially happen with that development. This actually is, I think, part of Atlantic Fields. I didn't take it from 24. What's that side street by the state police barracks? Yeah, Mulberry Knoll. So I believe that's part of Atlantic Fields. Okay. All right. Well, thank you. Yeah. But as I said, just because it's small, just because it's an island, doesn't mean that it isn't providing valuable ecosystem services, and we really need to be looking at trying to preserve and manage those resources. All too often, of course, this is what happens in our developments in Sussex County, where the first step in a development process is clearing and stumping. Now, as a forester, I'm going to say something that may surprise you, but not all forests are equal, and I don't know that we need to retain everything. But we do need to retain something. We do need to retain some of our forest resources. We need to be able to identify those in a forest what is valuable and needs protection or preservation and what doesn't. But this practice where they're going in and clearing and then stumping, all the carbon that was stored there has now been lost and is going back up into the atmosphere. I really think that and Sussex County Preservation Coalition has been talking about coming up with some kind of a percentage of undisturbed that on these developments that, because this footprint of what's going to happen there isn't going to encompass the entire property. But they cleared the entire property. Why clear it all when then you're going to just build on a portion of it and then go in and replant some more? Now, I understand from their stormwater and, shaping and sloping that they need to do some of this, but I think they can be much more strategic. And then what oftentimes happens is after that's taken place is the topsoil gets all stripped off and stockpiled. On my development, bye-bye, I saw a lot of it heading who knows where. I don't know where, but it was being sold. Oftentimes now, I must admit, it's being set aside so that once the houses have been developed, the topsoil is brought back on and used in reshaping. But once again, I don't think there's a need to disturb the entire site. I think that we can do a much better job of trying to maintain some undisturbed land in these developments. And then what happens when that's scraped off is this is my development, and that is part of our open space. There's absolutely no topsoil on that. The equipment has traveled up and down that so many times that the Proctor index, which is talks about compaction, is like at 5. Nothing is going to ever grow there. Once again, if that was intended to be open space, and this was forested, why was it cleared? Why was the topsoil removed? And now it's going to try to grow grass at some point.
Would your community support adding 1 or 2 or 3 or 5 acres of new forest in lieu of what we're looking at?
Well, we're right in the process of transitioning from a POA or from the developer control to a community controlled. But the developer will still have to meet all the county codes and before everything gets turned over to us. Our hope is that because according to Sussex Conservation District, there is a county requirement that there's 3 inches of topsoil on these open space. So our hope is that we'll be able to get the developer, or it'll be part of the negotiation process to get some topsoil put back on there. But yeah, that's going to be a question once our community has control over this. What do we want to do with it? To me, it's a waste of time to mow it. Well, Because we're not a POA yet, I don't know what our sentiments are, so I'd contribute toward it. Another issue that the Sussex Preservation Coalition has been working on is coming up with tree protection standards, because once again, there's really no standards in the county code related to tree protection techniques. All you got to do is it Warrington Road that heads down by the Rotary, and then what that development Arbor Lynn, where they tried to retain some trees. Good for them, but that was the kind of practices they were doing. You might as well not have done it. The tree roots extend the width of the crown. Those trees are going to die, similar to the ones at Arbor Lynn, because there were no tree protection standards in place, and we really need to work on that, get that incorporated into it. And it can be done. Here's an example of a development where, in fact, they've done an excellent job of trying to retain existing forest that was there pre-development. It was, so that it can be done. Once again, I realize it's probably that you can't do this stuff for free. It's going to cost more, but I think all of us appreciate quality of life and be willing to pay that premium to get that. And I don't think that developers can't do this. And we talked about, earlier about the, not requiring more landscaping in our developments. Now, in this particular case, on the section on the left, that green belt, that area between the curb and the sidewalk, is too narrow. You really need a minimum of 4 feet in order to be able to grow. Jeff would know that, in order to grow a tree. And then even there, you need to put in trees like they've done here, which are probably cherries, that are not going to be like oaks that are going to take over the space. But I think we can do a much better job. And the same thing with forested buffers. And we got to give the county credit. They did address perimeter buffers, and now we do have a requirement to retain existing forests as part of the perimeter buffer. Because let's face it, the buffer on the right is always going to be better than whatever occurs on the buffer on the left. Vermont poet laureate Robert Frost, in Mending Fences, used the term "good fences make good neighbors." I don't think he was thinking about this when he came up with that. Physical walls, we're seeing this more and more often now in Sussex County, particularly where it's along a major thoroughfare, major entrances. And once again, I'm hoping that the county, in their process of looking at planning and zoning regulations, will start doing a better job requiring more landscaping along the road arteries going into these developments, and trying to preserve forests and those values. Just one other thing. One of my pet peeves is volcano mulching. And this is not just a Sussex County issue, but it's prevalent throughout the country. And by mounting that mulch up around the thing, I swear the landscapers must get paid by the yard because they put so much mulch down. But remember, we talked about how tree roots are the lungs of the tree, that they're absorbing oxygen, and it can't do that when they're surrounded. So you can see how deep down that is. And that tree, once again, at my development, is suffering as a result of that. It was planted too deep and then too much mulch. I've said this a number of times, is that we can't plant ourselves out of this dilemma that we've made ourselves in. We really need to look at preserving and conserving as much forest as we can, more developments that take nature in mind and do analysis of existing natural systems and vegetation and trying to work around them. Because just doing what we're doing and then thinking that we can provide all those benefits and values that I talked about earlier through planting trees is not going to work. Because this is what we want our communities to look like. We want to see forested fragments. We want to see streets and homes with tree canopy and all those benefits and values and the quality of life that provides all of us. And then finally, just want to end with a tree that I took a picture of when Sue and I were in Portugal. That's purportedly 1,000-year-old olive tree. And the fact is that trees are going to be around a lot longer than we are. But we owe it to them to manage and preserve them the best we can. And there's a list of some of the references that I used. And with that, I'll open it up for a few more questions.
We will post all of these slides on the website. And so you'll be able to get those off of the SPC website.
Steve, your first slide showed, I think it was 79% of the state's forests were privately owned. To me, that's a disappointing number to think that those acres are almost 80% owned privately. What's the percentage of forest in Vermont owned privately versus in public hands? Do you know?
Yeah, it's around 75%. But I wouldn't, just because it's under private ownership, wouldn't say that it's necessarily mismanaged or unmanaged. The state of Delaware has several programs that they provide technical assistance and management guidance to private forest landowners to manage their land in a sustainable way. So, and of that 79% and 75% in Vermont, it's maybe into private ownership, but it could have conservation easements placed on them that would maintain it over time. So, you know, it's the United States is different than the rest of the world, where most of the world, particularly in Europe, the forests are owned by the public and not privately owned. U.S. has this normality.
Just a final follow-up question on regulation. Let's say that I'm a real estate developer and I want to build $200 million homes near Stowe, Vermont, a pretty ritzy area of the state. And let's say I purchase a 200-acre site and it's fully wooded, fully forested. How am I restricted, or am I restricted in terms of cutting down trees in order to build these $1 million houses?
I should let my wife, regional planner, because that was in her region. The state of Vermont has a development law called Act 250. All developments over 1 acre in size, is that the acreage? 1 or 2, yeah, depending, over a certain size have to go through a state review process. They have somewhat similar to Chapter 99(9)(c), which has a certain number of criteria. In Vermont, there's 10 criteria that the developer applicant has to meet, has to demonstrate that they've met these conditions. And they range anything from agricultural soils, forest conditions, wildlife habitat, water, and then public utilities, and so on. They have to meet these criteria. They have to provide demonstrated results. And as a and then once again, at the state level, there are state plans that dictate how forests need to be retained. And then each individual county and town has town plans that set standards on how a percentage of what has to remain.
So I can't clear cut the 200 acres.
No.
Questions?
Thank you. Thank you, Joe. I have two tree-related questions. One is there have been some recent books that talk about the benefit of not having a single tree, but having sort of stands of trees because they communicate chemically through their roots to support one another. So I'm wondering if there's a minimum number of trees for tree health. And my second question is your thoughts on some sort of, I don't know, regulation, certification. It strikes me that anybody could put out a landscaping shingle. You can't just put out a nursing shingle. You have to be recognized for a certain body of skill and knowledge. Is there a way to make sure that people who call themselves landscapers understand not to volcano the mulch around a tree and how to take better care of them so we know what we're getting?
Yeah, to answer your first question, you're absolutely right. You know, in a forested setting, trees are in groups. They're not standing alone. So in that symbiotic relationship of trees and root systems and their stems, they communicate. So yes, I would definitely concur that if you can plant trees in groups of 2 to 3, that's better than individual. Absolutely. In terms of your second question, there are certification programs. Certainly, landscape architect, you have a license to, and landscape companies. There are national organizations that provide certification programs. But as an example, the tree care company that currently our developer employs, they have an ISA, an International Society of Arboriculture, certified arborist on their staff, but the people that are actually doing the work aren't there and they're not being adequately supervised. What needs to happen, and I've been encouraging the Delaware Forest Service to put on more workshops for the green industry to really try to get out there and try to get these companies to bring their staff to them and come out with brochures and material for them so that they recognize some of these poor practices aren't helping us.
Thank you. So coming from New York State, where as a citizen I encountered the seeker process and strong state level regulation of conservation, it feels like we're back in the 70s here. I'll leave that for you. But so my question is, within a particular parcel, it's all well and good to regulate tree removal. However, if I have a 400-acre forest and 100-acre parcel that's part of that gets clear cut, then that forest was reduced by 25%. And so, as you know, forests are physical entities and parcel lines and economics are human fantasies. So what mechanisms, particularly in a Delaware environment where property rights and local control are viewed as gifts from God, what mechanisms can be used, maybe seen in other states, to support preservation of forests? You can't necessarily regulate it. That's a heavier lift. How can you incentivize it?
Actually, the Delaware Forest Service has a cutting permit. So any harvesting, and I apologize that I don't have the figures right in my head, but it's at a certain threshold. In order to clear or harvest over a certain amount, you need to get a permit from the Delaware Forest Service. That's all private landowners, and their service forester will come out, look at your plan, look at your harvest plan, and either approve or disapprove it. There's some limitations. As an example, they're trying to maintain what little loblolly pine plantations are left. So there are some forest types that they're really reducing that impact on. So the Delaware Forest Service does have some regulations in place that do set limits and regulations on timber harvesting in Delaware. Well, see, that's what, and we met with Kyle Hoyt, who's the Delaware State Forester, and they're trying to work that out because there was a period of time when the developers were purchasing this, harvesting this with trying to remember how this worked. They're trying to address the difference between private landowner harvesting, and that needs to go through Delaware Forest Service, and then harvesting for development is reviewed and approved by DENREC.
One
Isn't
more
that-
question.
Isn't that what?
Yeah,
you
I think
remember?
that's what happened.
Yeah.
Anyone else? One more question? Well, thank you, Steve, very much. I learned a lot. We have